Thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm so happy to be joined by Heike Reichelt. She is the head of investor relations and sustainable finance. And Heike, I want to learn more about what sustainable finance is. But before we do that, could you tell us a bit more about where you work within the organization and what it is that you do exactly?
Sure. Thanks so much. It's nice to be here. Well, I work in the World Bank Treasury in capital markets and investments.
Okay.
And the main thing that we focus on is making sure that we have investors so that we can access the capital markets. And the World Bank, or IBRD, has been accessing capital markets for over 75 years to finance the sustainable development activities. And IDA accessed the capital markets about 5 years ago. And so what we do is we speak to investors, we make sure that they have all the information they need to be able to decide to buy our bonds and provide us with capital. And you asked about sustainable finance. So basically, sustainable finance is an approach that incorporates sustainability factors into the investment decision. So investors will look at factors like climate change, social factors like inequality, and also governance when they're making their investment decisions. And they need to have that information because it's about risks to their portfolio, but they need to also know what the opportunities are. And when they assess their investments, they're also trying to find things where they can make a positive impact, or at least make sure that their investments don't have a negative impact on people and planet. So that's what sustainable finance is.
I love this. I mean, this is all just very fascinating. I feel like things you wouldn't normally realize.
Well, the World Bank is actually a platform for sustainable finance. So basically that's what we do. We raise funds and then we channel them to sustainable activities in developing countries. So that's what we do.
So Heike, I think this is a great segue into my next question, which is on private capital mobilization. You mentioned that the World Bank raises funds from investors in capital markets. So can you talk to me a bit about that? How much does the bank issue each year?
So yeah, the World Bank channels funds from private investors and we use those funds for development. And the World Bank, or IBRD, raises about $40 to $50 billion a year. The amount varies from year to year. There's been years where it's been more than 70 billion, for example. And we raise that money by issuing bonds in many different currencies. Just last week we issued dollars, euros, and Australian dollars for almost 8 billion.
Wow.
And I mean, we were talking about sustainable finance. So oftentimes when people hear sustainable finance, they think about green bonds. And we actually issued the first green bond in 2008. And that was done in response to demand from investors who were interested in making a positive contribution with their portfolios. So they were starting to get concerned about climate risk, and they really wanted to do something within their mandate, within the rules that they had for investments that made a positive difference.
So how do you engage with your investors? Has that changed over the years, and who are your investors even?
Yeah, so for example, the first green bond that we issued was for the Swedish pension funds, but we have a broad group of investors, many different investors all around the world. There are asset management firms, large pension funds, also central banks or the bank treasuries in commercial banks. And the way we've engaged with them has changed over the years. When I joined the World Bank a long time ago, our conversations were really focused, only around credit, the financial characteristics of the products. And we did tell them about what the World Bank does, but it's only been really since that first green bond that their interest in how we're using the fund has grown. So the questions that we get now are very different. They go into a lot of detail about our environmental and social framework, about how we work with the countries, how are we helping them achieve their development goals. So it's a lot more detail.
Well, I'm sure it's also exciting to kind of see how the process has evolved in that time. So looking ahead to the future, where do you see innovation and development in this sustainable finance market?
So I think there's a lot happening, and as you said, it's nice to see the evolution. I think there's two main trends. One of them is sort of like the bigger picture. There's a ton of focus on disclosure, information, data, and that's fueled by policy. Investors are setting up a lot of reporting, so they're asking for information. Transparency is very important to them. They want to understand what risks they have, what environmental risks they're facing, social risks, and as I said, they're also trying to find things that make a positive difference. There's also like bigger developments, like thinking of new growth models, like thinking of how to capture the value of nature or the value of human capital in sort of growth models, in economic growth models. So there's this very big picture trend. And then on the other side, there's the sort of more market-based or product-based trend. And one is just more. So there's more issuers coming to market. The World Bank has teams who are working with the governments in developing countries to help them build sustainable capital markets, to help them set up programs where they can provide this type of information to investors who are interested in it. And then there's the part about the new products, so innovation on the new product side. And we've been working on something that we call outcome-based bonds.
Okay.
So these are bonds where the return that investors get depends also on the performance of the project. So when we issue bonds, I mentioned green bonds, but we've broadened to a holistic approach where we're labeling all our bonds as sustainable development bonds because of the mandate of the World Bank. And we're explaining to investors how we use the proceeds for our sustainable development activities. With the outcome-based bonds, we're still doing that, but there's also a feature in the structure of the bond that makes it different. So investors can, for example, contribute to wildlife conservation, or they can contribute to very specific water projects. And there's going to be a panel at the spring meetings where that's going to be discussed. So there's going to be examples, and so if viewers are interested in that, they can listen into that.
That's great. Well, a lot of important work that you're doing there, Heike, and thank you so much for coming on here and sharing that with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for those tuning in, that was Heike Reichelt, the head of investor relations and sustainable finance at the World Bank.